Welcome to Adamant Atheism. On this 6th episode, I'll talk a little bit about the Orlando massacre at the Pulse nightclub, introduce a new segment called Shitty Arguments from Shitty Christians. We talk a little bit about circumcision and why it sucks, and some more status updates from my buddy Michael Wong. Let's get to it.
Hi, this is Lisa Googe, welcoming you to the Adamant Atheism podcast. Get ready to kick back, philosophize, and worship Satan.
Alright, so I realize that I'm pretty late with this, but this is the first episode I've done since this incident happened a while back, about a week and a half ago or whatever. The Orlando massacre at the Pulse gay nightclub. This was a massacre by a religious homophobe. You can blame Islam, blame homophobia, or whatever. I'm putting them both together because you can't have homophobia without religion. There's no logical, rational, realistic reason to dislike gay people without religion involved. Religion is the only driving force in the world today that actively opposes homosexuality. I'm not familiar with a single secular organization that one of their tenets or parts of their code of conduct or whatever actively discriminates against gay people. Only, exclusively, religion does that. And there are people who refuse to say things like radical Islam and not all Muslims and all this. And yes, that's true. Not all Muslims behave this way. But the guy did call the police. He claimed it was for Islam and was for ISIS. People say he didn't have official ties to ISIS, and I don't give a fuck. You don't have to be a card-carrying member of ISIS to do hateful shit in the name of their religion. If some asshole wants to go shoot up an abortion clinic and then claim ties to the Westboro Baptist Church even though he's never been there, I'm still calling that an act of Christian terrorism. This was Islamic terrorism, whether he had any kind of ties or official status in any Muslim group or not. That doesn't matter. It matters where his sentiments and where his motivations came from, which were his beliefs in Islam. And see, one thing that really frustrates me to no end about this shit from Christians and Christianity is, yes, the majority of terrorist attacks by far are carried out by Muslims. But don't for one fucking second tell me that there's not a huge number of Christian conservatives in this country who wish they had the balls to do what this motherfucker did. I know people personally who, if it weren't illegal and they weren't scared of going to jail or for going to hell or whatever, would totally go out and kill gay people. I know them personally. Not that I'm friends with them anymore or anything, but I was grown up in a very conservative Christian environment. Like, very. With a bunch of fucking redneck conservative hillbillies who hated black people, hated gay people. Pretty much their views were in line 100% with the Klan. I used to have a friend that was actually the head bodyguard of the Grand Wizard of the KKK, and he wanted me to join. I was like 16 at the time and very impressionable. And since this is what I was raised around, it seemed like kind of enticing at the time. I never went through with it. I never could push myself over the edge to actually join the Klan. But yeah, I know Klan members, and I know people who would take great joy in committing this kind of fucking atrocity, this massacre. I don't associate with those people anymore. I'm just saying people like that still exist in the world today. It's not just Muslims. Although the Muslim religion teaches this kind of behavior is not only acceptable, it's commanded to be done. And the Bible says the same shit. You can twist the words around any way you want. You can play around and say that, oh, but Jesus abolishes the Old Testament. Fuck you, dude. Don't give me that bullshit. You can say whatever you want about Jesus abolishing that shit. And if that's the case, fine. Then that means we have to throw out the Old Testament. That doesn't mean that we get to keep the parts that we think are happy and nice and loving and peaceful, and then throwing out the parts that we deem shitty. No, it's all or nothing when you're talking about an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God. If we're going to pick and choose that shit, you would expect the God, the perfect dude, the one who wrote the thing, to be able to differentiate between hateful bullshit and love. That shouldn't have been in there in the beginning if this guy is all-knowing and all-powerful and all-loving, right? It's not up to mere mortal humans to decide what is and is not moral in the grand scheme of things when we have a omniscient, omnipresent, omnibenevolent God to guide us through. If he's supposed to be the standard bearer, then no Christian or religious person gets to say that this was a bad thing. It falls directly in line with the holy book they use that they say is perfectly in line with the unchanging, all-loving, all-knowing will of their God. Right? He's the one who wrote the thing, and if you really believe that he is all those things, then you don't get to say that he made a mistake here, or we can just ignore this part over here, but ooh, look at this over here, this is nice and loving. Fuck that. People say it's not that black and white. Yes, it is! In this particular instance, it is black and white. The guy wrote this fucking book. Okay, no he didn't. There is no God. But let's just say, for sake of argument, that there is. There is an all-knowing, all-loving, all-present, all-everything God. Okay? When he wrote the book of Leviticus, he would have known that in 2,000 years, through his knowledge of the future, or whatever, that his son would come and die for sins and change all the shit from back in the Old Testament. It doesn't make any fucking sense to think that he would put something in there that he would later change his mind about. If you know the future, how can you change your mind? If you know everything and how things are going to be different in the future, you can't have a change of heart because you would have already seen that coming the first time you wrote this shit down. That doesn't make any sense. Okay? So Allah, Jehovah, Yahweh, all these goofy fucking stupid gods supposedly foresaw all this shit and put it in their holy books. So I don't have very much patience for Christians who say that the Bible is the perfect word of God and then, in the same breath, condemn acts like this. Condemn acts that follow directly with what the teachings of the book are. If you believe in a book that says gay people should be murdered, and then when gay people are murdered, you say, ooh, I don't believe that was the right thing, you're being completely inconsistent 100%. There's no way around that. It is black and white. It is one or the other. There's no murky area when you're talking about a perfect being. So yeah, 49 gay people are dead, 53, I think, are injured, and this was a product of religion. Religion and piss-poor gun laws in our country. Islam sucks. Christians who say they believe in the Bible and condemn this kind of thing, they suck. I appreciate their compassion, but it's one of two things. They're either lying, and they don't really believe this shit in the Bible, or they're stupid and refusing to acknowledge reality that their book says that this kind of thing is commanded by God. Either way, it's a lose-lose for religious people. Fuck religion. Okay, so here's a new segment I'm trying out for the show. This one is called Shitty Arguments from Shitty Christians. So this past week I was at a bar with my friend, and we were outside having a smoke break, and another guy walked out and struck up a conversation, and I don't know, just out of nowhere he asked me what kind of stuff I do for fun, like my interests or whatever. So I listed off a few things and ended with activism. And he said, well, what kind of activism? And I said, atheist activism. He goes, atheist activism? I said, yes, sir. And he said, okay. How are you going to feel when the devil's shoving his pitchfork up your ass in hell? I kind of just brushed it off and didn't really address it much. My friend who was there with me, she talked to him a little bit about it, about how, why would you want to worship a God that sends you to hell and would let that happen to you anyway just for not believing? And, of course, he didn't have any good answers for it, so he he was kind of being like sort of playful-ish, and he was showing me his religious tattoos of angels and shit and talking about angels. And then he said the following, and I quote, "If there is a sun god, how can there be no God?" What? So I was like, what was that? And he said, again, "If there is a sun god, how can there be no God?" Okay. At this point, I just put my cigarette out and I walked back inside. I have no time to address these stupid fucking arguments that this guy just made up out of nowhere. He was drunk anyway, and anything I would have said wouldn't have had any effect on him. He was just rambling about trying to defend his ridiculous beliefs by making himself look even more ridiculous. If there's a sun god, how can there be no God? Dude, get the fuck out of here with that bullshit. For one, how am I going to feel when the devil's shoving his pitchfork up my ass in hell? What a stupid fucking thing. You like watched too much Looney Tunes as a kid with the devil in a red suit with little horns and a pitchfork stabbing people in the ass in hell. Grow the fuck up. That's a cartoon, you jackass. How do you fucking people take this shit seriously? It's embarrassing. I get embarrassed talking to these people. Like my face turns all red like, dude, you're a grown-ass man. Why did you just say that? You can't be seriously trying to convince me that you're right by saying some bullshit like that. Like, has this ever worked on somebody? Has he ever said something like this and was like, you know what? You're right. God is real. Jesus is his son, and he did die for my sins. You're right. I'm going to go to heaven instead of hell with the devil and his pitchfork. And really, that's just a play on Pascal's wager. Everybody knows Pascal's wager, right? It's easier to believe in God because if you don't believe in God and you're right, then it doesn't matter. If you don't believe in God and you're wrong, then you burn in hell forever. And if you do believe in God and you're wrong, then it doesn't matter. But if you do believe in God and you're right, then you go to heaven forever. It's like playing a safe bet with the God claim. And that sucks because that can be used for literally every single God ever. All the thousands of God you could use this thing on. It's more like playing the odds. It's not an argument. It's fucking stupid bullshit. And it could even be used in the atheist perspective too. I could say, well, what if there is some kind of God up there, but he only lets people into heaven who were brave enough and skeptical enough and intellectually honest enough to look for evidence and not believe in a God until evidence came around, and he threw people in hell who were so gullible that they just believed shit because they were scared of hell. Right? It's just as valid. But, of course, I didn't say that to this guy because I had shit to do. I was at a karaoke bar, I had songs to sing, and a crowd to entertain. Fuck that guy. Okay, let's go ahead and change gears here for a minute and talk about another hot button issue. Circumcision, also known as genital mutilation. Now, this is an issue that I feel pretty strongly about, and I have a really, really hard time understanding why I'm in the minority with this. It doesn't make any sense to me. To me, it's so simple and such a clear-cut, easy-to-understand issue that I don't understand why so many people are still for circumcision. Now, the thing is, I think most skeptics and atheists agree with me on this. And I actually think most people would agree with me on this if we had, like, one-on-one discussions. It's very rare that I meet somebody who is violently in favor of circumcision. The majority of them are just, like, non-complacent. They just don't care either way. They just go with it because it's something that everybody does, so what the hell, let's just go with the crowd because we're fucking sheep and can't think for ourselves. And from that crowd, I have a list of arguments that I've heard that they try to just breeze through to justify their non-caring about cutting up their child's dick. So let's go through a few of these arguments and see if they hold any weight. Okay. The first argument I've heard in favor of circumcision is, it's cleaner and more sanitary. This sucks. I hate this fucking argument because it's basically saying, I'm a shitty, lazy parent and I would rather cut my kid up than to just wash him properly. Sure, you can have about a second a day extra in your life if you don't want to peer your kid's